Welcome to DEF CON.
All right.
Can you guys believe the hackers have been coming to the desert for 25 times now? Give yourselves a round of applause for coming to the desert 25 years. So I believe we're making history here. This is the first time sitting congressmen have been to officially, in an official capacity, as speakers at the largest hacker conference in the world. So that, to me, looks like some progress. We're going to do some introductions in a minute. First things first, we're going to do a little framing to explain why we were able to get these two distinguished public servants to our conference. So we've been coming here 25 years, and we are not necessarily a single tribe, and a lot of the outside world thinks a hacker equals a criminal. And I think over the last few years, we've been turning that tide, and now they understand there's hacking is just a form of power. It's like magic, and we can use it for good, for ill, for any number of purposes. And one of the ways we've been trying to turn that tide is explaining why we do what we do. And we all have different motives. Not everybody in here is the same. But, you know, alliteration works, short lists work. So we have these 5 Ps. We basically say some people are protectors. They want to get stuff fixed. They want to make the world a safer place. Some people are puzzlers. That's why most of us got into this in the first place, right? We want to tinker. We want to take it apart. We want to put it back together. We're curious. Curiosity is our original motivation. Some of us do this because we want to win the white jacket or we want to be famous. We do it for prestige or for pride. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's allowing us to achieve great things. Some of us do this for profit or personal or professional gain, and we make a career out of it. And some of us do this for protest, for or against some ideological cause that we care deeply about, ideally within the bounds of the laws. So whether you're motivated by being a protector, a puzzler, prestige, profit, or protest, you know, we're complicated individuals, but there's a reason you got into this in the first place. And there's a reason you stay in it. So for my part, I want to make the world a safer place. So I'm first and foremost a protector. And luckily over the last several years, we've met several of you that feel the same. But you know, I also like hard problems, so I'm a bit of a puzzler as well. And we're going to ask these congressmen during their intros, why did you get into public service in the first place? What's your motivation? Now, in the spirit of that, 4 years ago here at DEF CON, we launched I Am the Cavalry. This was the idea that could we be a voice of reason, an ambassador, a translator? Should we bring DEF CON to DC? Should we try to be a voice of translating the things that we care about, specifically wherever there's issues of public safety and human life? The idea is, could we shift from being a pointing finger at past failure to a helping hand towards future success? Could we stop celebrating failure and what's wrong with something? Could we look for what's right with something? And through that, we focus more on empathy and communication than we did on breaking things. And because of that, we've slowly made ourselves accessible to public policymakers. And whether you guys knew this or not, over the last 2 years, there are 18 parts of the US government who enthusiastically support and encourage the use of coordinated vulnerability disclosure. So not only is what you're doing not criminalized in all cases, and we're slowly turning the tide on that with things like the Digital Millennium and Copyright Act exemptions, but they also see us as a vital resource and a teammate if done right. One of these two gentlemen on stage on the floor of Congress said, "Go hack the Pentagon." So I think we're turning the tide, and this is something I think it's worth a little bit of cheers for yourselves and for others. Now, there's a long way to go. Last year was pretty hot for first-of-a-kind policy engagement on cybersecurity issues. Yes, I said cyber, but A, I did my friggin' shot, and B, this is the language they speak on the Hill, and if we want to be effective, you know, when you're in France, you speak French, right? So we have to harmonize the way we speak about things. But in the legislative and executive branch alone, we saw the Food and Drug Administration really tighten up things like medical device cyber safety. We saw the Department of Transportation do this. We saw Commerce encourage disclosure and patching best practices. DHS, White House. And Congress themselves also asked, almost presciently, they said, we're concerned about over-connectivity and security risks in our healthcare, which is a sixth of our economy. So while we were all talking about information sharing in the CISA Act of 2015, They also asked for a one-year congressional task force. And in that, they wanted a diverse number of stakeholders to say how risky is connected medicine. And on June of this year, we published this. They actually made sure they wanted a voice of hackers. So I am the cavalry, and a lot of the hacker community got to participate in this one-year-long task force. Now I'm going to say some stuff that's a little scary so we can ground this group in why we're having them here today. So of the many things we found, the punchline was that healthcare is in critical condition. And whether you can read this graphic or not, the 5 things on the front page of this report are essentially about 85% of our US health delivery organizations lack a single qualified security person on staff. That should scare everybody. And this is not a US only problem when we talk with our international partners. Number 2, we tend to be defending legacy XP or older in the clinical environment. So these things are well past their end of life and they're no longer supported. Number 3, they tend to be overconnected to each other and reachable by the outside world, which means that a single flaw in a single device can take out an entire hospital, as you saw with Hollywood Presbyterian last February. And moreover, the average device in the clinical environment has over 1,000 known vulnerabilities. So put those together. Most of our hospitals lack a single one of you. You're defending harder to defend things. They're overconnected to each other and reachable by the outside world. A single flaw in a single device took out patient care at Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital, and the average device may give us 1,000 chances to do it. We have done amazing things over the last 25 years, but we need more of you to help us solve these wicked problems. And if there wasn't a sense of urgency as we were publishing this report back to Congress, WannaCry took out 65 hospitals in a single day in the UK. That was 20% of their national capacity. You know people died from degraded and delayed patient care. So I want to call out to the best of you as we reach out to the best of them. And in the spirit of that, I think we've proven the model can work over the last 4 years, bringing DEF CON to DC. In fact, some of us have actually quit our day jobs and moved into think tanks like the Atlantic Council and whatnot. And now we've brought part of DC here to DEF CON in a way that hasn't been done before. And I am honored and humbled that we have 2 sitting members of our democratic process here. So please, I'll introduce them in a moment, but let's give it a huge round of applause for these 2 pioneers. All right, we're going to try to keep an eye on the hashtag if you want to send me your poll answers and whatnot. DEF CON, DC to DEF CON. First, Representative Jim Langevin, he will give his own intro, but I was really excited to work with him as the chair and founder, co-chair of the Cyber Caucus in the House of Representatives, and also Representative Hurd of Texas, who also a very strong and leading and informed voice on cybersecurity issues, and I'll let them tell you their origin stories. But please, gentlemen, weave in which of the motivations do you carry to public service? So, you first, Representative Langevin.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Josh, for the introduction, for the invitation to join you today, and I want to thank both you and DEF CON, and let me also recognize Bo and the Atlantic Council for everything you did to make our visit here possible. And let me just say to the security researchers community, thank you all for what you do. And I know that collaboratively together, we're going to make a difference in this field, and we're going to make the internet much more secure than it is today, and we're going to do it together. So I thank you for that. I know it's a challenging environment for sure, a dynamic one, but I find it really an amazing topic to work on. I am thrilled to be here with my colleague Will Hurd. Will and I serve on the Homeland Security Committee together, and let it be recognized here that I can tell you bipartisanship is not dead on the hill. There are pockets of it that still exist, and guys like Will and I hopefully are helping to set an example and helping to raise the bar so that we can show that by working together, that's how we truly get things done. So it's great to be here with my colleague. So
you can clap for that.
So just briefly, a little bit about myself. So I am a congressman from the 2nd District in Rhode Island. I'm in my 9th term in Congress, and I sit on both as a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee and a founding member and senior member of the Homeland Security Committee. In all of that work, I specialize in cybersecurity, and the ranking member on the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee on Armed Services, and we have primary jurisdiction over NSA and U.S. Cyber Command. And on the Homeland Security Committee, I sit on the subcommittee on cybersecurity and infrastructure protection. But I have to tell you, I kind of fell into this world of being involved in cybersecurity better part of a decade ago, when I was the chairman of the subcommittee on emerging threats, cybersecurity, and science and technology. And originally, I thought we were going to be focusing mainly on the emerging threats part of the responsibility, which was to look at all the most serious threats facing the country, such as chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats to America and our allies. And then one day, my staff director came in to me on the subcommittee and said, "Boss, you've got to get a briefing on this thing called the Aurora threat, discovered by two researchers at Idaho National Labs, where they found a vulnerability into a critical infrastructure through a skater attack, and hence everyone now knows that as the Aurora threat." But I was riveted by the video that showed how a generator operating normally, all of a sudden, because of a malicious code that was remotely inserted, caused this generator to spin up out of control and then basically shake itself apart. And that was just a small example of what could happen to our electric grid and potentially shutting down a whole portion of our country's electric grid if a successful widespread skater attack were ever to be carried out. So that is how my interest in cyber began. And just to close out, from there, we were asked, Mike McCall and I, my co-founder and co-chair of the Cybersecurity Caucus. Mike now chairs the full Homeland Security Committee, but he's been a great, again, bipartisan partner in this effort to enhance our nation's cybersecurity. He and I were asked to be co-chairs of a national commission, the CSIS Commission on Cybersecurity for the 44th presidency, which became the foundational document for President Obama as he charted the nation's cybersecurity blueprint and plan going forward. And then we also, as you know, co-founded the Cybersecurity Caucus. And when we originally started in this field, I have to tell you, we got a lot of funny looks. Mike and I, we felt like kind of lone voices in the wilderness, and people did not understand what we were so worked up about. They get it now. Times have certainly changed, but we still have a lot of work to do. Clearly, the awareness has been raised, but now we've got to continue to work together to close the vulnerabilities. So that is just briefly, probably went on too long, sorry, but that's my introduction to the cybersecurity challenges that the nation faces, and it's a continued work in progress. But I've been really gratified to know that there are people like you in the security research community who are doing important work, discovering vulnerabilities, and I'm hoping that we continue to forge stronger partnerships to help to do something about it when we find those vulnerabilities. And as I said, I know that we're going to be able to do this together. Will's been a great partner in this effort, and I'm pleased to again share the stage with him. But I want to thank you for your invitation, and it's an honor to be with you today. Thank you.
Which P are you, Jim? Put the list back up.
Yep, I'm the one wants to be the one that fixes things.
It's definitely not prestige, right?
No.
Yeah, that's when you have a 9% job approval rating, that's not prestige. Anyways, not us individually back home, obviously, right? But as a body.
Yeah.
Am I too far away from this? How do we get that echo out? Anyone? Pull it back. This way. Well, again, thanks for having us here. This is my second time to DEF CON, and I always take a lot away from the interactions that we have, especially on the sidelines of many of these events. And I appreciate the Atlantic Council for making this happen and getting us out here to Las Vegas. Let me see a show of hands. How many? If this is your first DEF CON? Okay, wow, a lot of noobs. Yeah, give it up for the newbies. How many's been here over 5 years? Okay, over 10? We got any of the originals? No originals? What, DT ain't here? DT didn't want to come hear our talk?
They're all on duty.
Yeah. You just came here because you drank too much last night and need someone cold to hang out? Anyone? Okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate the honesty. So I'm from San Antonio, born and raised. And a lot of San Antonians, there you go. And when I was in high school, I had the opportunity to take an internship at the Southwest Research Institute. And I had a female engineer that exposed me. Yeah, female engineers, give it up. Exposed me to robotics, and is the reason that I first got interested in computer science. And I studied it at Texas A&M. And yeah, whoop, Giga Maggies, it's our year. It's our year. Watch out, Alabama. And so also, if you need a Turbo Pascal or Fortran programmer, let me know. I still know a few things. And I had the opportunity when I graduated, I went into the CIA. I was a case officer. I did 2 years in Washington, D.C. at what I used to call the super secret CIA training facility called the Farm. Now it's on Google Maps. And 2 years India, 2 years in Pakistan, 2 years in New York City, a year and a half in Afghanistan, where I managed all of our undercover operations. So I was the dude in the back alleys at 4 o'clock in the morning collecting intelligence on threats to our homeland. And I also had to brief members of Congress. Had I met a guy like Jim, I probably would have stayed in the CIA. I unfortunately had not been exposed to Jim and Mike McCall and Ted Lieu from California, folks that really understand the issues that they're talking about. And so I was frustrated with the caliber of our elected officials, and so I ran for Congress in 2010, and I lost. Why does that always get a laugh? I still don't understand that. I lost a runoff by 700 votes. And it's not a lot of votes, and it's even worse after you've been to the grocery store for the 2 months afterwards, and people came up to you and like, how's the campaign? And I lost. They're like, oh shucks, we forgot to vote, you know? I literally ran into 740 people like that. But it gave me an opportunity to work for a company called Crumpton Group, boutique consulting firm, and I helped Matt DeVoe with and build Fusion X. And so if you don't like anything that I do, see Matt DeVoe. Everything I've learned about this industry, I've learned from DeVoe, and he's been a good friend. And so understanding penetration testing, technical vulnerability assessment, things like that, understanding the talent that's outside of the government, understanding the threat that individuals and companies are faced. It was a great experience, and to be able to leverage that when I got in Congress. And so 14, I ran again. Everybody thought I was crazy. Nobody thought the black dude would win in a Hispanic district. And I represent a 71% Hispanic district. And it's been an opportunity to work on issues like cybersecurity. And that means in Washington, D.C., it actually means information sharing. We should have passed the Cybersecurity Act of 2015 10 years ago. But we finally got something done. We focus on privacy, and I said yesterday, I don't know which crypto war we're on right now, but we should be strengthening encryption, not weakening it. our civil liberties are not burdens. They are the things that make our country great. And we can chase bad guys, we can defend our digital infrastructure, and we can protect our civil liberties all at the same time. It's hard. And one of the things that Jim and I have to do when we educate our colleagues is to let them know that, guess what? There's really no such thing as an impenetrable device. Come out to DEF CON if you don't believe us. And so we have to get to a point where we can do security and protect privacy at the same time. And this conversation is going to go back and forth, right? This is always the topic of backdoors and encryption is always going to be out there, and you're going to have to continue to fight that back. And having the support of folks like y'all is really important to do that. And I will say everybody knows now what OPM stands for.
Yeah.
Right? As Lindsey Graham says, mucho bad. It's that brought a consciousness to this issue that everybody understands the importance of protecting our digital infrastructure. And our colleagues understand that, but they don't always necessarily understand the nuance. And that's why, we try to educate. That's why having y'all is important. Many of our colleagues think that direct messaging on Twitter is the dark web, It's like, well, no, it's a little more complicated than that. But there's a interest in understanding that topic. And so I always get nervous when someone says, "Oh, I'm an expert on anything," and let alone cybersecurity, especially being in a room with folks like y'all. But coming out here helps, prevent our knowledge base from getting stale. So I appreciate y'all everybody's been super nice to both of us. I think everybody's a little worried that we might have gotten attacked or something when we got here. But it really y'all have welcomed us with open arms, and your willingness to help us understand the big issues and the small issues. And I'm looking forward to talking more about some of those big strategy things that we have to get right before we're able to do some of the small things. So thank you all.
All right, your friendly reminder, I put out a Twitter poll. It's got probably 20 minutes left, maybe 10, on which topics I should prioritize amongst Mirai botnets, WannaCry hitting hospitals, power impacts, or Wassenaar export controls that may affect our ability to do our jobs internationally. So please vote. I'm going to keep an eye on it for one of our last questions. So yesterday we had a pretty full lineup. These guys are very robust in their ability to take in information. We had a lot of briefings yesterday. We took them on a walking tour of many of the villages downstairs. We saw auto hacking village, lockpick village, IoT, industrial controls, the voting machine
Roots.
hacking, the kids, Roots hackers. So, I know you're both pretty savvy on cybersecurity, but what really stood out? What was your biggest surprise, and what kind of things might you be able to act upon when you get back to DC if you want to continue this cooperation?
The things that I was surprised by is the voting machines, right? And the fact that all 24 got dismantled in less than 6 hours. That is a huge problem. We have to ensure that the American people can trust their vote tabulating process. And now, the machine is just one step in that process, but I think the work that has been done out here is important to educating the secretaries of state all across the country, as well as the election administrators, the people that are tasked with doing this. And a lot of times, I have a county that's the second least populated county in the United States of America, 95 people in the entire county. I've met 72 of them. And they don't have a cybersecurity professional to help them, manage that process. And so figuring out how the states and these election commissioners election administrators are understand the risk and vulnerabilities is important. So that was important. Things that we can take away. I'm interested in doing a hearing on the 5 points. The 5 points when it comes to connected cars. It is an area that I think we have to have a little bit more conversation around, because I want to ensure that we don't create an overly burdensome regulatory environment around some of these issues. And I think connected cars is the subsection of IoT that most members can get their heads around. But it's such a broader conversation. And how do we prevent, I don't want the government to get in the way. I want the government to be able to facilitate and to allow entrepreneurship to grow. But we all know we have to bake in security. Let's not make the same mistakes that we've made in the creation of the internet. Let's not make those same mistakes when it comes to IoT. And those are and look, learning about TLS 1.3 and y'all's opinion on that. Y'all's opinion on what is the future of quantum computing, and how quickly is that going to get here on some kind of commercial scale, and how do you defend against quantum computing? These conversations are going to lead me to hold hearings on many of these topics through the subcommittee that I chair.
Excellent. Thank you.
So the thing that surprised me the most, many of you have seen me riding around, and I use an iBot wheelchair to get around, and you can pop it up on 2 wheels. Same inventor as the Segway scooter, Dean Kamen, a brilliant inventor. The thing that surprised me the most is that when I went into the car hacking room, that someone didn't find a way to hack into my system and start driving me around. So I did wonder if it was going to happen, and it actually it's a sophisticated piece of technology, and I don't pretend to understand all the magic, but I know it has 6 gyroscopes that keep it balanced. And I did put it down on 4 wheels just in case. So, but
he's here for 4 more hours, by the way.
So that was the thing I suppose that surprised me most that didn't happen. But it's a good thing. But I have to say that I too was surprised, and though not shocked by the election voting systems, and apparently how easily those systems could be compromised and hacked. I knew that the electronic voting systems are potentially vulnerable, and certainly I've heard the reports. How easy it was, though, was an eye-opener. So I was a former Secretary of State as well, and before that I served for 6 years in the Rhode Island General Assembly as a state rep, and I actually chaired a special legislative commission on purchasing new voting equipment. And the one thing, although I love technology and I was impressed by the DRE equipment, the touch screen back then at the time, I could never get past the fear, the concern that, what happened if everything went south and the data was lost? How do you ever recreate that election or prove, to verify how people voted is actually how, the vote turned out? And so we consequently wind up recommending to the legislature, to the governor at the time, that when we choose new voting equipment, that it should be optical scan, so you can have the best of the old and the new technology, but you have to have the paper ballot as the ultimate audit trail. So that's what I wound up doing, and I was able to get new optical scan voting equipment for the state when I became Secretary of State. But to go in the room and talk to the professors and the researchers who set up the room and who set up the challenge, and to hear how easily the systems were compromised was certainly disturbing and an eye-opener. It certainly gives me pause as we go back to DC now, and I'm part of a task force to look at elections, and this is certainly going to be a primary topic of conversation. The other thing I'll just say finally, the one thing that really impressed me is how the hacker community wants to be proactive at both identifying and and closing vulnerabilities in our cyber ecosystem. So I look forward to those growing those opportunities and making sure that we have a way to have a vulnerability disclosure process at each of the government agencies. I think it's something that's long overdue, and that's something that I hope to work with you all on.
On that last point, Jim, and I want to add, I told this story yesterday. Some reporter asked me, are you out here to get all these hackers civically engaged? And I was like, what are you talking about? They already are, right? And the feedback and what y'all do for society is incredibly important. And we got to make sure that we can continue to build upon that relationship. So, and I think we want to try to come back as often as we can, and would love to see y'all up in DC as well.
So I knew yesterday we had them in a small room for 2 hours of completely unvetted questions and exchanges. It was amazing. It was magical. I wish we had 2 hours now. We're at about the T-minus 15-minute mark. Really quickly, what's an example? We want examples of positive and negative or effective proactive or reactive forms of engagement for the hacker community. And I remember over lunch you were talking about a good example of the risk of Wassenaar. Can you quickly explain an example of how hackers helped you do your job and preserve U.S. interests?
Sure. So this is something that I tackled pretty aggressively with my team once that we became aware of the problem. And again, it was the research community, the tech community that came to me and made us aware of what was, I'm sure done with good intentions, missed the mark. Wassenaar trying to use a Cold War legacy agreement to prevent dual-use technologies from falling into the wrong hands. When you try to apply that to software and to prevention of transferring intrusion control software, that it missed the mark. It didn't work. And here you had the Department of Commerce that was charged with promulgating the rules and regulations of how this is going to work. During the comment period, the research community really stepped up, the tech community really stepped up and made robust comments. And I can tell you, I took those comments and these challenges and the stuff that you brought to me, and with 124 of my colleagues, was able to organize a letter to the Obama administration to really ask them to change course on the addition of these controls and now we're making slow progress in getting those controls clarified. But it wouldn't have happened without the engagement of the technology community. I just want to underscore, never underestimate the value that you bring to the table in advising policymakers about what's going to work and what's not going to work, or what we need to do to change course to close vulnerabilities. So there are 435 members of Congress in the House, 100 members of the United States Senate. We all have varied interests. We all have things we, per se, specialize in. And you have a small group of us, myself and Will and Mike McCall, Dutch Ruppersberger, we have Matt Thornberry, and a couple others here or there that really get cyber, and we've made it a primary focus of what we do. And then you've got the next level down of members who recognize it's important, but it's not maybe per se their thing, but they want to know more about it and they want to be up to speed on it. And then you have a significant number that it's not their thing, maybe it's never going to be their thing, but they still need good advice and people coming forward to advise them in their staff. So I just wanted to close by saying, never underestimate the value that you can bring to the table in helping to educate members and staff about what the best policies are and what's going to work and what's not going to work. And again, never assume that we know all the thousands of bills that are introduced in Congress each year. It's not possible. So if you hear something or you become aware of a bill or idea that you think we need to know about, be proactive about it and engage. And I just, in closing, I just ask you, rhetorically, how many of you have ever made an appointment with your member of Congress or their staff, or written an email, or made a phone call? I would just ask you to be proactive, because you can have an impact, and we want you to be engaged. Thank you.
And an important point in that story as well is that the process around this worked. The feedback that Commerce was getting instigated, some congressional hearings, the We Focus letter, and one of your own ended up going into the negotiating room in Europe to try to fix this multilateral agreement. And so I think this is a great example of how the right engagement of really smart people fix a problem. Now, we're not completely there yet because we haven't signed the new agreement, but I think we're going to try to sort that out in December. So it's an example of how the wheels of the process worked.
Yeah. Now let's hear it for Katie Missouri, because she was the one that really helped in that.
Yes, Katie. Yeah.
Thank you, Katie.
Katie Mo.
Yeah. So Kate, I want a picture when you walk in with all these stuffy diplomats and your pink hair, and make sure you get that picture next time.
Right. Now that wasn't a good, Karen Elizari says that hackers are the immune system of the internet, right? So we flocked to a dangerous threat to the way we do our jobs in security in this particular case. But on some of these, we want to get in front of them. So for our part, it looks like the Twitter poll was a pretty tight race here. The winner was concerns over our power utilities infrastructure. So in the U.S. and other countries, these are designated critical infrastructure and are very, very important, but they're often privately owned and operated and often quite exposed. It's a pretty close vote with also Marai's effect on taking out the internet for a day. These low-cost, low-hygiene devices. There's so many of them now with the Internet of Everything. And then also the WannaCry type hospital outages, where it's just too easy for these things. We tend to summarize these at the Atlantic Council that our over-dependence on undependable things is exposing us to accidents and adversaries that could be a national security level event. Instead of us flocking to maybe go stop bad Vasanar, what are the appropriate mechanisms or most effective mechanisms for us to proactively engage with members, with their staffs, with committees? It's a bit of a confusing and nebulous thing for us. If you could give us some succinct advice about where to get started or what's worked to date for us bringing topics so that we don't wait for hospital outages.
Sure, I would go back to what I touched on just a few minutes ago. Don't wait till something comes to your attention to start engaging with your members of Congress and their staff. Introduce yourselves ahead of time. Get to know them. Let them get to know you, and develop a rapport. Open up a dialogue, so that you've already established that rapport, that trust, if you will. And so when something comes to your attention that is serious and needs to get their attention right away, you already have a point of contact. You don't have to go searching for who that person is.
On many of these issues that you just went through, there is a lack of a proper strategy on how to deal with it. And so let's start with doing something to industrial controls within the utility grid. So was 3 years ago, 2 years ago, this was no longer a philosophical exercise. The Russians did it in the Ukraine. If you look at the UN says there's certain things that are an act of war. It is fooling with somebody's grid. It is an act of war according to the UN. What was the response to the Russians when they did that? Nothing. The sanctions that were put in, and the sanctions that we just strengthened in the House this week, was not because of that. And so if you don't articulate what a response is going to be to a certain red line, that's a form of deterrent. And so what should an actual response be in that case? And there's all kinds of conversations around it, but there's not an accepted policy at the NSC that would ultimately drive this. Now, folks in Congress, we can be shining light on this and talk through these issues. It's the Homeland Security Committee, which we're on. It's the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, where I chair a subcommittee there. It's Energy and Commerce, and it's also Science and Technology, right? But Homeland and OGR are two of the ones that do the bulk of some of this work. And so it's important to educate us, the individual members of Congress, but we also need y'all sitting down with some of the staff that populate these committees, sitting down with GAO. GAO is basically the Inspector General of the entire government, and then every department has IGs as well. But these are the folks that are looking at kind of the holes in policy, the holes in tactics, techniques, and procedures when it comes to defending digital infrastructure. So that we need to help. We need to be talking about what's the strategy. So then we can start talking about the tactics and how we should be, who should be responding to what. And this is another problem when it comes along with disinformation. The Russians are trying to erode trust in our institutions. Period. End of story. And how do we deal? We do not have a counter covert influence strategy. And many of y'all in this room can help and have dealt and have operated in some of these communities that we could be leveraging intelligence from and talking about. So we don't have a strategy there. So that's something that I'm concerned with, because guess what? We're going to see this in 2018. And it's not just the Russians. We know other nation states have tried to do this. And based on what was demonstrated in the last 48 hours, we got to tighten up some of these voting machines as well. So all of this stuff is connected, and nobody has the right answer. But talking to folks that live and breathe this is important. And so committee staff's important. The legislative director, wherever y'all live, you're a member of Congress, you should know the district director. You should know the legislative director for your member. Those are two people that drive the policies of those offices.
Yeah. And who on their staff is the point person that deals with the research community issues in particular. And I just want to say something else, if I could, just to underscore what Will had said. What the Russians did was outrageous. It was wrong, and they are going to keep doing it, particularly if they're not hit hard enough, that if they don't get strong enough sanctions, or the message isn't sent clear enough that we're not going to tolerate that kind of interference and undermining our pillars of our democracy. And we have to look at this holistically and say that as a nation state, we have a whole suite of options that we could draw from to retaliate, to make the point that we're not going to accept that kind of interference with our elections, and we need to make it very clear going forward.
All right, we're reaching the end here. Boy, I wish we had 3 hours for this. So as we face these challenges, they're not going to slow down. I think while we were here, one of the victims of NotPetya, it was Merck in the pharmaceutical industry, admitted that material impact on the production of several of their drugs. This is designated critical infrastructure. Unrestrained cyber munitions got outside its intended target and affected U.S. critical infrastructure. These are the types of companies that make our pandemic vaccines and shots in case we have a national emergency. So as I look across this room, I see a lot of raw talent. And I know in general, we're loath to regulate, we're loath to work with government. We, in general, like the come as you are, do as you please type zeitgeist. I know a lot of the things that we see come on the news or on the Hill might have some rough edges. as things get very, very real and as the consequences of failure get very, very high, I really encourage you to see that they're outreaching a hand and trying. And when they publish something or they ask a question, look for what's right in it and cultivate that. We're really, really good at what's finding wrong with something, but I think we're at the stage now where we have to make that outstretched hand and go that extra mile and meet in the middle if we're going to rise to meet these challenges together. So I see what we've done here maybe as a coal or a little ember, a little bit of heat and light. We can either snuff it out or we can foster it and grow it into a real vibrant collaboration here. We have now brought DC to DEF CON. I'm trying to make it happen so we can bring more of DEF CON to DC. Perhaps we could turn this into a regular thing, maybe a cyber caucus in the summer here, maybe a cyber caucus in DC around ShmooCon, just saying. But if you like this, look, when we said 4 years ago the cavalry isn't coming, it meant it fell to you. It wasn't to be depressed, it falls to you. So if we see something missing in the world, we gotta put it there. I hope this is the start. I respect and admire every single person in this room. I respect and admire our colleagues in DC. This has got to be the beginning. We've been amazing for 25 years. Who are we gonna be for the next 25? Thank you.
Thank you.